Hello, everybody. This is Stacy Lake, and this is my March 31st, 2024 special edition of Let's Talk Jackson over the stadium tax issue. I want to begin by saying for the people that won't have the time to view this entire live stream, that my opinion on the stadium question is that everyone should vote no for a multitude of reasons, and which we're going to cover today. But let's begin this presentation. So, as an overview on Jackson County question number one, Jackson County question number one will state, shall the County of Jackson repeal its countywide capital improvement sales tax of 3/8 of 1% authorized by section 67.700 of the revised statutes of Missouri and impose a park sales tax of the 3/8 of 1% authorized by section 644.032 of the revised statute of Missouri for a period of 40 years to provide funding for park improvements consisting of site preparation and clearance, developing and constructing, furnishing, improving, equipping, repairing, maintaining, and operating both Arrowhead Stadium and its surrounds and a new baseball stadium and its surrounds, to retain the Kansas City Chiefs in Jackson County, Missouri, and the Kansas City Royals in Kansas City, Jackson County, Missouri, pursuant to long-term leases, and to refinance debt obligations previously incurred to finance improvements to the Harry S. Truman Sports Complex. This seems like a lot, but we're going to break it down. First off, these are the important sections that you should see. First, that this is a tax to repeal, or this is a vote to repeal and impose. What it's doing is it's repealing the original tax that was passed in 2020. That was passed originally, and then opposing a new 40-year tax, which is at the 3/8 of 1%. And also, it's going to be for a period of 40 years. Now, one of the biggest changes on this, besides the fact that it's a 40-year tax, is that it's adding the provision that this will allow construction of a stadium, and also it's adding the ability to refinance the debt obligations that were previously incurred. Now, and I'm going back to the original slide. On the section where it says that it's going to repeal the original tax that was authorized by 67.700, this is specifically in our Missouri statutes, the tax that are for capital improvements. And what this statute is basically stating is that the county government can issue up to 0.5% of a sales tax for capital improvements. That means to repair any capital or any governmental buildings, or anything relating to improving buildings that are owned by that municipality. Specifically, in paragraph 1 and 4, it states any county may by ordinance or order impose a sales tax on all retail sales made in such county for any capital improvement purpose designated by the county on its ballot submission to voters. And Section 4 specifically states the sales tax may be imposed at a rate of 1/8%, 1/5 of 1%, 1/4 of 1%, 3/8, or it's basically up to 1/2%. So in this section, it basically states that the county government, when it comes to funding capital improvements, can issue a sales tax up to 1/2 of 1%. Now, that is going to be repealed so that instead of using the capital improvements version of the tax, we're going to tax it through Missouri Statute 644.032, which is the parks tax, okay? And so what this specifically states is the governing body of any municipality or county may impose by ordinance or order a sales tax in the amount not to exceed 1/2 of 1% on all retail sales made in such county. And this statute is a taxation option for basically stormwater control or local park issues. So for instance, if a county wanted to impose let's say a 3/8 sales tax in order to increase funds to provide more park services, they would issue it through this statute. Now, we're just getting started on this tax. These are these are some of the takeaways that we should really dissect first. Is that first, this is a 40-year tax. Okay? And also that it is a new tax. A lot of the chiefs and royals flyers or mailers that have been going out have been reiterating this falsehood that this is not a new tax. So we're going to be repaying the same tax, except it's going to be for 40 more years. But as I showed beforehand, this is a new tax for several reasons. First, we're going to be using the tax statute from parks rather than capital improvements in order to procure these funds. Second, it's a 40-year tax, and when the original tax expires in 2031, and what I really want to stress here is that if we use this parks tax for 40 years, what it will also mean is that, say if for some reason we, and when I say we, either the county government or the residents of Jackson County wants to have a tax that would solely go to the improvement of parks. If we allow this tax to pass, we will only have access to 1/8 of 1% available for other park improvements for the next 40 years. Okay? This isn't for, the next 25 or 15 years. So that means if anything occurs in the next 40 years that we need to, that the government will need to find new revenue streams in order to utilize for parks, we will only have 1/8% of 1% available because we are spending the majority of that available tax towards this stadium. But also, this allows the Jackson County government to refinance and issue new municipal bonds to pay for the construction of this stadium. Now, before we get into this is the Royals' official argument, and you can find this on their Vote Yes on One website. I went through their website. I tried to find any factual information to back these claims, but I could not find any. And so I took the fact sheet, which was the only thing available on the site, and I basically simplified it. So This is basically the Royals' argument that they're going to keep both teams in Jackson County for the next 50 years. Their second point is to allow Chiefs to stay and renovate Arrowhead Stadium. They state that no one will pay more taxes, additional benefits to meet needs of our Jackson County community. It states that it will eliminate obligation to pay stadium insurance premiums, which equals to $200 million in economic benefits. They also state that the Royals will invest $1 billion in private investment, and this will lead to an economic boost and jobs. They state also that the jobs that they create would mean more jobs for unions and for women and minority-owned enterprises, better game experience and parking. And the final point basically says that they're going to potentially invest in criminal infrastructure investment, meaning that they're going to try to make the area safe. Now, the takeaway from their fact sheet is that there is a difference between opinions and facts, okay? A person could have an opinion and state anything that they want, but facts are based upon empirical data and studies, and nothing that this fact sheet provides is linked to any empirical data or studies. And also, it does not cite anything to back its claims. Now, we're going to go through this point by point, okay? The first point they make is that this tax will keep both teams in Jackson County for 50 years, okay? That is false, okay? First off, right now, the lease agreements in Jackson County for both teams expires on January 31st, 2031. That means we roughly have around 7 years in order to make a new lease agreement or to make a new lease agreement for the Royals and the Chiefs. Now, the proposed lease agreements, and these proposed lease agreements are lease agreements that are contingent upon the April 2nd tax initiative passing. In those lease agreements, the Chiefs have only promised 25 years and the Royals have only promised 40 years, with both terms starting on the 2024 date and not on the 2031 date. Now, on this one, and this is specifically taken from that lease agreement. Now, the Chiefs extension for 25 years is in fact only 18 years, since the extension starts in 2024 and not in 2031. And so even though they say, oh, well, first, it's not 50 years. But second, they can say, oh, it's still 25 years. But in fact, it's only 18 years because their current lease extension expires in 2031. This is the same way for the Royals extension. And here is the actual contract language taken from their proposed lease agreement. And the commencement date is the date when the taxation actually passes. So instead of it starting at the end of 2031, it will start at 2024. So it's not 40 years. It's actually only 33 additional years. Now, before we get into allow the Chiefs to stay and renovate Arrowhead Stadium, I want to mention one point is just the deception, okay? It's one thing for them to say, oh yeah, this is what I believe, it's 50 years, but to market that to a large populace that, oh, the Chiefs are going to be here for 50 years if we pass this tax, when at most it's only 18 more years is deceptive and it is wrong. And that's the same way with the Royal Stadium, where these lease agreements are not for an additional 40 years, but in fact, it's only an additional 33 years. So going to the next point that they argue is they state that this will allow the Chiefs to stay and renovate Arrowhead Stadium. This is misleading because our current tax already allows this. Currently, we still owe more than $170 million from the last renovations done on Kay and Kauffman Stadium. So if we pass this tax and they decide to construct this new stadium in the Crossroads and they destroy the K, we are inherently losing over $170 million that we will never get back. And the reason why we invested the $170 million in the first place was to make sure that the K was maintained as a world-class stadium, which it still is to this day. And the people who voted on that tax all those years ago basically voted for the tax based on those promises that it will be maintained properly. But now we are going to be losing over $170 million because they're going to destroy the K in order to build this new stadium. But my next point is the Chiefs can't afford to renovate themselves. This is one of the biggest points that I want everyone to leave here today, is that we should not subsidize billionaires. Billionaires have enough money to pay for this themselves. The Chiefs can afford the renovations themselves. Last year, they made over $90 million in profits, okay? And what that means is that after everything was paid off, all the inflated salaries, all the cost, all the like any issues, after everything was paid off, they made on top of that $90 million. We are not dealing with an organization that can't afford renovations themselves. And so we don't need to be we don't need to be locked into a 40-year tax to subsidize organizations that can finance themselves. The next argument that they make is that no one will pay more taxes. And that is a lie. Yes, you will pay more taxes because the current tax expires in 2031. So basically, if we don't vote for this and we don't vote for an extension of the tax, if the current tax expires, then we will pay less taxes. That's just a fact. And also, since this is a tax that moves the taxation from the capital improvements to parks, it takes away future usage of that tax for 40 years. And as I stated before, this will only allow us to utilize 1/8 of a percent for other park projects. So for instance, if we have an emergency that we have to find revenue to help the park, like say if it's a stormwater issue, we have this massive flood, we will only be able to put on a ballot an initiative for a 1/8 of a percent sales tax for that specific park issue, which that is a huge problem because this is a 40-year tax. We do not know what will happen in the future. This is one of my favorite points that they raised. Additional benefits to meet the needs of our Jackson County community. This leads me to question, what additional benefits? What specific needs will be met? And I watched the majority of the presentations that the Chiefs and the Royals have given on the stadium and what improvements they're going to have. But a lot of these improvements are not for the average person. Like the Hunts in their improvement sections, they were talking about VIP suites or the addition of more VIP suites. The average Jackson County person cannot afford that. And Also, what specific needs will be met? There's not going to be any beneficial specific need of for the Jackson County community that's going to be met for building this new stadium. We have areas in Jackson County that do not have sidewalks, that do not have street lights, that don't have access to sewer. Passing of this tax won't change the realities of those places. So when they're talking about additional benefits to meet the needs of our Jackson County community, they're specifically talking about benefits for, one, people that actually attend these sports games, and two, people of a certain economic status that are able to afford these benefits. These are not benefits for the everyday person. Their next point that they state is that by passing this tax, we're going to eliminate the obligation to pay stadium insurance premiums. Now, this is a smoke and mirrors tactic, because this agreement to eliminate the insurance premiums has already been agreed to between the Royals and Frank White without needing to be on this April ballot. Specifically, this was not contingent on this question or this 40-year tax. You have to also think about it this way, is that 200 million future dollars saved does not negate the 2 billion tax dollars given to billionaires, okay? It would be one thing if the Royals was like, hey, we're going to pay all the premiums in the past to help you out, but they're not. They're just stating that, oh, for this renewal, we're going to pay for our insurance premiums and you don't have to. Those are two different scenarios. And honestly, $200 million is a drop in the bucket for the amount of money that we will provide to the Chiefs and the Royals over the years. Their next point is that the Royals will invest $1 billion in private investment, and this would create an economic boost for unions and women and minority business enterprises, okay? So my response to this is that the Royals' private investment is for themselves. They're investing $1 billion in order to not only just build the stadium, but build the entertainment park as well. And that, secondly, this is a lateral movement, okay? So what I mean by a lateral movement is that it would be one thing if the Royals was not in Kansas City or Jackson County. Like, say if the Royals was a Austin, Texas team, and they were trying to get to Kansas City and we're like, hey, we're going to invest $1 billion. And if you pass this tax, we will come to your city, right? But that's not the case. The Royals, the current K is only, I think, and don't quote me on this, but I believe it's 18 miles away from the proposed crossroads locations. And so in economic terms, this is just a lateral movement. This is taking the jobs from one section of the county and moving them to somewhere else. And so all the jobs that are going to be created are temporary, because the majority of these are just construction jobs that, once a stadium is constructed, will basically go away. And this is proven by countless economic studies that I will provide, at least on my Facebook page, because I don't think it'll allow me to do that on Twitter. All the links that all the studies that I'm citing to in this Let's Talk Jackson. But there's an overwhelming majority of economic studies that state that sports stadiums do not increase jobs permanently. They show that there is a temporary increase during the construction stage, but once the construction stage is over, there is no evidence of long-lasting increases in jobs in that local area. And that should cause great concern for everyone, because when they're talking about oh, the unions and the women and minority owned businesses will receive these economic boosts, we have to ask for how many years, because this is a 40-year tax, right? So if construction of the stadium, let's say, lasts for 10, I'm giving them 10 years, right? Even though they said it will be built in 2028. Actually, let me just take their point. 2028, it's going to be built. So that's 4 years. After the 4 years, there will be no economic impact. There will be no increased jobs from that area, because all the jobs that were initially through Kauffman and through the K are basically just going to be moved 18 miles to the crossroads. And so there's going to be no long-term increase in jobs. But also, there are much better ways for women and minority-owned businesses to receive economic boost. And this is one of the things I was talking about to a lot of organizations during my campaign, is that our current minority-owned business and women-owned business allocations are currently out of date, because the last time that we did a survey was in 2018. And so right now, it's basically the county's policy that they will only allocate 21.2% of eligible contract dollars to women-owned or minority-owned businesses, right? So if we want women or minority-owned businesses in the long term to receive more of an economic benefit, a simple way to do that would be just to increase the Jackson County Code for the amount of contracts that should be given to minority-owned or women-owned businesses. Their next point is better game experience, parking, and safety. Now, I have to agree with them on the better game experience, because new buildings are generally better than old buildings. I can't argue that point. But the next point is it really worth the cost? And I really want everyone to consider that we're talking about $2 billion in taxpayer money over the next 40 years. That means that I would be 77 before I'm able to decide whether or not to extend this tax. And if I had a child this year, it wouldn't be until they were 40 years old till they would have a decision whether or not to extend this tax. Also, parking will be a nightmare, and there is nothing that anybody can show me to prove otherwise. I live in Midtown. I go to the crossroads almost every day. I have to go down Oak Street to go to the Jackson County Courthouse. And during certain times, and this is without a stadium, without baseball games, parking is a nightmare. Anybody that lives in the crossroads, downtown, Midtown will agree. And if you don't agree, leave a comment in this video, and I will get to your question or your comment. But anybody who lives in the area knows that there's not enough parking downtown. And the fact that they're not going to increase parking, but they're going to rely on the existing parking availability is, in my mind, a bad policy. But finally, we have to ask the question, can the Royals really guarantee safety? It is not a surprise to anyone that Jackson County currently is in a historical upswing in violent crimes and in murders. In 2023, we had a historical murder count in Jackson County. And I'm going to do another video on this, but I specifically want to state that, well, it's not just Jackson County, but also in Kansas City. In Kansas City, there was 182 homicides. 120 of the victims were Black men. And this is what we're dealing with. And if you look at the historical trajectory of crimes in Jackson County, they have only been on the increase since 2016. So one thing that I learned from Preston Smith, he gave me the statistics on this, is that in 2023, approximately 11,000 crimes were reported in the 1 mile radius of the new proposed site. And this would be in the Crossroads. As a person that lives in Midtown, this does not surprise me because I know as a Midtown area resident, we have been in a crime wave for the last several years. And the fact that in the Crossroads there were 11,000 crimes in 2023 for me is not an overstated number. I think that it's actually pretty accurate. And but this is the comparator. In the current place where the stadium is, in 2023, only 124 crimes were reported at Kauffman Stadium. 124 crimes. How can John Sherman guarantee that they're going to provide the same level of safety at from the K at the new Crossroads location? They can't. And this is them again just misleading the community. So one of my main points I want everyone to take away from this is that there's no rational reason to vote yes. If you believe there's a rational reason to vote yes, leave a comment in this video and I will get to it at the end of this presentation. But when it comes to empirical data and studies that have been done since 1965, many scholars, and when I say many, at least over 80% of economic scholars agree that sports stadiums provide little to no economic impact in an area. But on my first point is billionaires should not be subsidized. I don't understand why I have to say this to a lot of people, but we have true issues in Jackson County. We're living through a historical crime wave. We already have been gouged due to property taxes. Our current Jackson County courthouse and the independent courthouse are crumbling. And we're thinking about providing $2 billion in taxpayer money to build a stadium that we do not need, that billionaires could finance themselves. We can use this tax money for better things. But more importantly is the idea of good governance, government officials making the correct decisions for the residents. How can you say that you uphold the principle of good governance when you allow a tax to go onto the ballot when there's no finalized lease agreement, no finalized agreement on how much the construction costs are going to be, and no finalized community benefits agreement? They're trying to trick so many people in this area, but in the last minute, in the ninth inning, by stating that, oh, there's a lease agreement and there was a community benefits agreement passed. Those are false for several reasons. They just received the first draft of the lease agreement and the community benefits agreement. This isn't a finalized agreement that all of the government officials agreed upon. And the side effect of that is we are literally planning to give the Royals a blank check to do whatever they want with our tax money. We are planning to not hold them accountable. And that is a dangerous precedent, especially when you have our mayor and several county officials so willing to do this, so willing to waste our taxpayer money that could be used to help other areas in Jackson County. But this is also an important point, that the Royals will still need $700 million more to construct the stadium that they don't already have. Now, I've heard through the grapevine that, and this is allegations that Quentin Lucas promised to provide them the $700 million, or that they would find the $700 million through city taxation, maybe through state taxation. But we already have Parsons on the record stating that he's not going to provide any money for these stadiums. So the only way they could get it is through city funds, which begs the other, or which raises the other issue is, do we want to use $700 million from our city's budget in order to provide for a stadium that's going to provide little to no economic impact in this area? Let me remind you guys, in 2016, the city of Kansas City provided Cerner $1.6 billion. How much did we receive back in economic benefit from that $1.2 billion? The answer is nothing, because Cerner went bankrupt. And now we have multiple buildings up and down Kansas City that are basically useless. So we really need to think about how we're going to responsibly spend this money to build a stronger Kansas City and a stronger Jackson County for the future. This is another point, is that the Jackson County government is still paying off over $170 million for renovations to the K. I've already talked about this, but when we passed this taxation back in 2006, they made a promise that we would invest in these stadiums so that they would be able to stay in these stadiums in the long term. Now they're breaking that promise. And we still have over $170 million to pay back on those bonds. And now we're contemplating that we are going to now give them $2 billion more to pay, for not only for the stadium, but also to refinance $170 million that is going to be, and it's actually even more than $170 million, because we are going to destroy the K. The $170 million was money that we spent in order to put in renovations to improve the K and to make the K into a world-class stadium, or to maintain that status. And now we're saying, you know what, that $170 million, we're just going to demolish it, erase it, and create something new. I don't know about you guys, but for me, that is not good governance. And finally, the new stadium will place us more in debt while destroying local businesses that provide to our economy. By voting yes on this question, and I showed you early on what the question read, right? It states refinancing our current debt. They're going to issue more bonds, refinance the current debt, or refinance the current bond, or the current bond debt that we have for the when we made the renovations to the K at the first time, and then put us more in debt in order to provide cash to the Royals in order to build this new stadium. And so we're going to incur probably over $1 billion in debt. And I mean, not like it's, and when I say in debt, it's, we are going to give these billionaire organizations hundreds of millions of dollars in actual today's cash. And the interest that we pay, that we have to pay off in 40 years is most likely going to be over $1 billion just in interest. That is ridiculous. Now, we're going to get into the economic analysis. Everything that I'm stating here is based upon studies that I've read, which I'm going to provide, at least on my Facebook page, the links to at the end of this video. But when we look at economic scholars, the majority of economic scholars have have made study after study stating that sports stadiums provide little to no economic impact to an area. Okay. Let me list to you some facts. Okay. Currently, there is no U.S. county where professional sports account for more than 1% of the county's private sector payroll. Okay. What this means is that the amount of jobs and, the amount of jobs and the salaries that are paid to these jobs do not ever, like, there's no county in the United States with all the baseball stadiums that total amount of payroll is over 1% of the overall private sector payroll. So that means that the amount of money that they're giving to these people is not a lot, okay, when it comes to the grand scheme of things. Like, for instance, if you think about hospitals, right? The percentage amount that goes to the private sector payroll is usually 3 to 5%, right? While stadiums, there's no stadium in the United States that actually account for more than 1% of the county's private sector's payroll. And this is because, and also this is another thing you have to take into account. Most of the money goes to the owners and the players. It doesn't go to the people that are taking like the other jobs, like the janitorial jobs, even the construction workers. Most of the money that's when sports stadiums play games, and the tickets that are generated through those revenue streams are given to the owners and the players, not necessarily to the people that work in the organization. Another big takeaway is the Chiefs and the Royals do not have to pay property taxes. And the important point in that is right now we are contemplating destroying an area that's going to destroy over 20 local businesses and negatively impact 60 to 80 small businesses in the crossroads. All those businesses in that area currently pay property taxes and pay other taxes to the city, the county, and the state. If the Royals construct this stadium in Kansas City, that section of land will not ever generate property tax revenue. And that is because the stadium is technically going to be owned by the county and leased to the Royals. So that means that they never have to pay for property taxes since they're not the owners of the stadium. This is horrific because the area in the crossroads is an area that I think everybody will agree on is a very profitable, high revenue generating area. It's a popular area. A lot of people go down there. There's a lot of local businesses. And that means we are going to deprive our schools, our hospitals, our residents from tax money that would be generated from those businesses for the next, at least for the next 40 years. But also, this is an important thing that a lot of people don't know is every time when there's a home game at a stadium, there is an agreement with the franchise that 34% of the ticket revenues would go to the visiting team. So when a home game occurs, we don't tax the entire 100% of those revenues. 34% of that is returned to the home team's area. And so there's only 66% of it available. And so we have to think about these things because all of these things when you look at it in a summation, really shows that these sports stadiums leave little to no positive economic impact in an area. But this is also a key finding is that cities and metro areas that invest heavily in sports stadiums have slower growth. And this is based on a study that took the years from 1990 to 2000, and they took 30 metro areas where a stadium was either newly built or refurbished, and they only found is three. I'm sorry, I can't see that number. I think it is three. Hold on a second. Yes, three. They only found three cities that experienced a difference in their economy, and all of those cities experienced a negative impact in their economy. The other cities basically they found that those stadiums left no economic impact in those areas. So in those past 10 years, none of those stadiums provided a positive impact for those cities. But also, we have to think about the bigger picture here, okay? Sherman bought the Royals team in 2019. Okay, so that means he's only been an owner of the Royals for 5 years. A lot of economists talk about this, where the higher the subsidy a team receives, the higher the resale price. And one of the examples that they use, which there's a long list of examples that prove this, but one of the more famous examples is the Baltimore team, or what happened to them in 1989 when the owner Eli Jacobs bought them for $70 million, right? He bought them for $70 million, then convinced the state of Maryland to spend $200 million in taxpayer money that was generated through the lottery, lottery revenue, to spend on this stadium, right? And then 4 years later, he sold the stadium. When I say sold the stadium, I mean he sold his rights to this team for $173 million. Eli did not spend $1 in this construction of the stadium, but he was able to make 150% increase with the sale of the stadium in 4 years because of the taxpayers' $200 million investment into this stadium. And so I state this because there is this underlining argument where it's like, is John Sherman really being honest when he's stating that, oh, I'm trying to build the stadium because we need a world-class stadium. The K is suffering from concrete cancer that hasn't been proven by any legitimate study? Or is there another underlining issue of John Sherman wants us to subsidize the stadium so that in the future he can sell the team for double or triple of what he paid for it initially? Now, when we're looking at whether public funds, which we're talking about public funds being used for sports stadiums, if the stadiums can generate new revenues, a lot of economists states that the only way that stadiums can generate new revenues for a city is three different ways. Okay, they can either generate new revenue by out-of-towners who are visiting the area that would not have come normally. Two, when you have locals that are spending more money in an area than they normally would do. Or three, it would lead to the creation of more jobs, which will lead to more people spending money in that area. Now, first, the majority of these studies conclude that these stadiums do not generate new revenues. But again, since this is a lateral move, and what I mean again by lateral move, since we're moving the K Stadium 18 miles west to the crossroads, none of these will happen, because right now the visiting out-of-towners, the potential visiting out-of-towners are already coming to the K. So there's not going to be an increase of out-of-towners coming to the K to see the stadium. Two, locals are already going to the stadium at the K to watch these baseball games. So it wouldn't lead to an increase of more locals spending in the area of Jackson County than if we did not build this new stadium. And as I stated before, more jobs wouldn't be created because the only jobs that would be initially created would be construction jobs, which according to the Royals, they're going to have this finished in 2028. So that's only 4 years of increased construction jobs. And after that time, there's all the people who had jobs for the K currently are just going to move over to the new stadium. And so it won't lead to new jobs. It won't lead to more people moving to Jackson County in order to work at the new stadium. And therefore, there's no way that this stadium is going to generate new revenues for this county. This is one of the points I really want to drive home is the Royals. This stadium issue is a lot of them are stating misleading economics. Okay, so internationally, when a government goes to their populace and states, hey, we're going to use taxpayer money to do this or to do that, right? The way that they present it to the populace is they show that this project is going to lead to higher wages and lower poverty, right? But the Royals, their main argument is you're going to receive all these millions and billions of dollars in economic benefits that are not proven by any study. Okay. Now, the reason why they can't use data to show that their baseball park leads to higher wages in the area or leads to lower poverty in the area is because they can't look back to all the years of the K be existing in the current area and show the positive impact that it has, or the positive economic impact that it has in this area. Because I promise you, if they had that data that showed that stadium led to higher wages, or the existence of that stadium led to higher wages and lower poverty in that area, they would be using it currently. But they cannot. And a lot of people know that in the area where the K currently resides, there are some of the poorest neighborhoods in Jackson County that are just miles away from that area, that don't have access to the sewer, that don't, again, have street lights, have proper roads. And we have to be considering these things because when we're looking at investing taxpayer money for infrastructure projects, we should be taking the international standard and asking ourselves, is this going to provide higher wages to our residents? And is this going to lower poverty? Because those two things increase the positive impacts on a person's life. Economic benefits really don't, and studies have shown this. So this is taken from one of my favorite studies that I read. So basically, this guy, he wrote this huge study on sports stadiums in 1997, and when he published that study, where it basically shows sports stadiums do not provide economic impact, he was criticized heavily by sports stadiums, by people who love sports. And so basically saying, like, you don't have enough empirical data to show this. And so in 2015, he comes back and writes a new study just to show, hey, all of my data was correct, and it's showing the same exact things 15 years from now. So, as I stated before, sports stadiums do not increase wages or employment in an area. And this is taken from his study, which he's using data from 1965 all the way to 2015. And they basically stated that sports stadiums contribute between 1/3 and 1/20th of a percent to the local economy. Okay. We are about to pass a tax that's going to give 3/8 of a percent uh, of tax of our of retail sales tax to the Royals, right? And we have studies that show that these stadiums only contribute at most 1/3 of a percent, right? 1/3 of a percent is, well, a third is 33, right? 3/8 of a percent is 38, or sorry, 375, right? So rounded up is around 38, right? And so that means even in the best case scenario, say if we were the top stadium contributors, like a states that were stadiums are doing the most economic impact, it still will not generate the amount of revenue to set off the loss that we're going to be losing each year to our local economy because of these because of the fact that sports stadiums do not generate enough revenue in our areas. Now, the next point is that we have to look at is the potential for fiscal loss in local government. As I stated before, we are going to pull bond money out in order to, or we're going to issue bonds in order to finance the stadium. When we issue bonds, bonds are basically debt, and we're going to have to pay off that debt and the interest over the course of the 40 years, right? So if we take 2 billion and divide it by 40, roughly speaking, we are going to give the Royals and the Chiefs $50 million in taxpayer money for the next 40 years. Okay. That's what we're agreeing to. And instead of using this money for other things, we're basically tying ourselves for the next 40 years to give the Chiefs and the Royals $50 million. So if you agree to that, then yeah, you should vote yes. But honestly, the Royals and the Chiefs, they generate so much money. We don't have to give them all of this money when we are not, when it's not even, we're not going to receive a lot in return. This is a deficit, right? These stadiums will not provide an economic good to our area. And so why should we allocate $50 million to these stadiums when A, we already have these stadiums, and B, they aren't going to provide an economic good in our areas. And my next point is that the majority of this money will be spent on interest payments and debt repayment for the on the issuance of the bonds. And it's kind of like you have to think of it as like a house mortgage. When you take out a loan, right? You have your principal payment and the interest payment. And if you do the calculations over the years, you'll realize that you're not, say if you have a house that you spend $100,000 on, you're not repaying the bank $100,000. If it's a 30-year loan, you're going to be probably repaying the bank back $300,000 over the course of 30 years. And so most of the money that we're going to be giving to the Royals and the Chiefs are actually going to be used to pay off interest payments and not actually being used for projects to help our communities. Now, this is one of the takeaways I want everyone to think about, is that we must look at the future, the opportunity cost. A famous a study that I read, the economist who wrote the study basically states that when making a choice, something always has to be given up. And this is the opportunity cost regarding sports stadiums, that if we allow ourselves to pass this 3/8 of a percent sales tax, we will be hindering the park's ability to issue taxes for support for the next 40 years. Not only that, we have to consider alternative uses that we will no longer be able to have access to. Like, first off, what the money could be used for. And second, what the land could be used for. In the Crossroads, we already know that local businesses are already using that land and run successful businesses with that property. But we not only have to think about the local businesses that will be bulldozed down to put this new stadium up, but also the loss of the K. You know, according to the Chiefs video, they're going to bulldoze down the K in order to put up like a practice field there. So that means all the hundreds of millions of dollars we have spent on the K are all going to be for naught. And thus we have to think about the opportunity cost, because the land in the Crossroads can be used for better purposes. It's especially for the local businesses that are using the land now. This is not an area that is desolate. It's an area that is thriving, that has taxpayers, that have successful restaurants and bars. And do we really want to be spending $50 million a year in order to subsidize the Chiefs and the Royals for the stadium? And this is my final point I want to make, which is we have to really think about good governance. This is a $1 million election. Usually our elections don't cost $1 million. And when I say a $1 million election, what I mean is the county government had to spend, I believe, $1,063,000 in order to have this on the April ballot. And that was because there was no other county-wide race happening. If the county waited until August or until November, they wouldn't have to spend that much. I believe it would only be around $50,000 or $100,000 because there's other races, other county-wide races going on during those times. But because they chose to have this election in April, the county had to finance this election on their own. And so we waste, like right now, if this initiative fails, we will have wasted over $1 million in taxpayer money that could have been used for anything in the county. And remember, back in November 2023, when they did this for Jackson County question number 1, the local use tax, okay, they spent the same amount, or not the exact same, but it was over $1 million to put that question on the ballot because there was no other county-wide races happening during that time, and it failed. So if this initiative fails, that means that we would have wasted $2 million in taxpayer money for nothing. $2 million that could have been used for anything else. And that's why I leave you guys with this, is that we must hold our government officials accountable for wasteful spending, because since there is no finalized lease agreement, there's no finalized CBA, we don't even know how much the stadium is actually going to cost in the long term. We could have waited. We could have waited until August. We could have waited until November. We could have waited a couple of years down the line to have this election. But they're forcing us to vote in April because, and this is allegations, I believe that John Sherman wanted to use the whole opening day as kind of a rallying point in order to have a higher probability of passing this tax on the ballot. And that is just wrong, because it's not his money. It's our money that should have been spent on other things. Anyways, if anybody has questions, this would be the time to write questions in the comments. But I see that there are no comments currently, and I am at the end of my slide. So this is the end of my presentation. thank you so much for listening to my chat on this stadium tax issue. And I hope I provide some clarity or at least some sort of information on this stadium tax issue. If you have more questions on this after this video is publicized, please just leave comments and I will respond to them. But otherwise, I hope you guys had a happy Easter and you guys have a great rest of the day. Bye.